What wedding moment made you think, they are not going to last long?
I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. Bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, etc. Note I said extra, it was already decorated by the venue. She just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago she sends my groom's mom, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she bought, $7,000 worth. And asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mom's side.
Gosh, help, when unasked for, can be the absolute worst.
My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students. Many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me, babe, like the previous time you called me." Other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally effed up 20-year-olds, or one big piece of performance art.
I did my undergraduate degree in literature and there was a lot of overlap with the drama students. None of this surprises me in the least. They were always bragging about how incestuous they were. By which they meant they all slept with each other.
I was maid of honor. Meet best man and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. Bride excused herself to go the bathroom and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking, south she's passionate about to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together and gave him the warmest smile, thinking he had praised her. He scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her but at her, behind her back. They lasted 7 months.
This one is so heartbreaking. Hope your friend is doing better now.
He ended up at the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He went out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight. She left the house and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes.
My uncle when he broke his neck trying to breakdance on his stag do. He went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now but because of his surgery he cannot turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's effing insane.
I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony. In the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They are divorced now. Edit to add, I believe it was a cousin calling, to ask if they were late for the wedding.
This is so absurd it's comical.
Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms and the girl next to me, the groom's ex, drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior.
Why are there so many exes at the ceremony in these stories? I get some people stay friends or date within a friend group, but I can't think of anyone I know where this happened.
The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time. Across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip and when I was leaving I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom and he replied, "I'm not sure there's gonna be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months I believe.
One of my friends was the best man at another friend of ours' wedding. His best man speech included this line, "I prepared some lines for tonight, but the groom sniffed them all in the bathroom." 3 months later there was a divorce due to a coke problem.
My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she'd summoned the photographer back shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy *** for me ***. Edit. Thought I'd add, they broke up when she cheated on him. Apparently, that marriage she was desperate for was only good while it brought her attention.
Like if she needed everyone's approval of her marriage. So insecure?
One of my friends got married. Afterwards she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish in the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage.
Better fish in the flower centerpieces? Explain please?
I figured I'd get asked this. I'm not sure if this was a Michigan thing, so maybe others can chime in, but people would have flower centerpieces in glass vases and a betta fish swimming in the vase. People could then take the flowers and fish home as a keepsake. My betta, Moroni, lasted a few years luckily. Great fish. Bad marriage.
When they got married illegally in high school. Two 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out.
I actually know a happy version of this. My HS English teacher's friend and her boyfriend took a bus to the next state over where you could get married at 16, and so they eloped in secret and came out about it after they graduated and have been married for over 40 years and counting.
After the wedding, my friend's new wife, who was fairly quiet in public, was screaming at my friend's family, telling them it was the last time they would be seeing them and how terrible they were. It was hard to watch. 2 years later, my friend walked in on her and a dude. That was that.
Two friends of mine got married, and when they gave their vows, the guy started laughing at the part about being faithful. Oops.
I once watched a live stream of the wrong Vegas wedding. The link I was given for a friend's wedding was incorrect, and during the exchange of vows, the groom got to the part about being faithful, and the bride visibly and audibly chuckled. It was hilarious to watch, but I bet they didn't last long.
At my boyfriend's sister's wedding, the groom got drunk before the vows and smoked WD after the vows. Was crossfaded as hell and made a fool of himself. When we went up to congratulate them after, she refused to be near him or take pictures with him. It was awkward. After the speeches, basically everyone left. Family was still around and they opened gifts. Someone gifted nice champagne and the groom tried to open it and dropped it and it shattered. Bride stormed off screaming. Groom got upset and started cussing out the air. They still went to their honeymoon together in Florida and she got pregnant almost immediately. Maybe 7 months into her pregnancy she kicked him out because he slept with her roommate. They got divorced when their kid was 6 months old. But it's for the best. The dude is a POS and wasted a lot of their money by being selfish on their day.
How sad that people bring new human beings into a known pusho.
Portuguese wedding. Fistfight broke out at the head table during the reception. Between two groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. Groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. Surprised it took that long. Midnight buffet was amazing though.
When we had to pay $35 for the paperwork to be filed, courthouse wedding, and he spent the rest of the day complaining about the waste of money.
When the groom ran up and punched the bride during the reception in some kind of drunken melee.
Where to start? The best man was the groom's coke dealer who dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on coke and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us every time he saw us, the bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding, whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more, and tell us, "Don't smoke WD, if his wife won't let me smoke WD in the house, then you guys can't." Every time we grouped up.
The bride and groom did the first dance, then spent the rest of their reception completely apart from each other, getting poo-faced with their own separate friend groups. The only other dancing all night was the bride dancing with her high school friends, the father-daughter dance and the mother-son dance, during which the groom was crying. The best man's speech didn't mention the bride at all and basically boiled down to, "Groom, you're married now, but our bond is older and stronger. All of our hunting and fishing trips together are the best thing in our lives. Can't wait for more." Such a sad, desperate atmosphere. They made it a little over 1 year.
I used to be a wedding singer and I played a wedding like that once. We had a hard time figuring out who the groom was because he was never anywhere near the bride. The first dance was delayed because the wedding planner had such a hard time getting the two of them in the same place at the same time. Afterwards they both stayed on opposite ends of the ballroom. In the 6 hours of the reception I don't think they ever spoke to one another. When the groom went in for the kiss after their vows and the bride presented her cheek instead. They divorced less than a year later after it was discovered she had been cheating on him pretty much their entire relationship. I hope you're doing better, Isaac.
I just wonder, what's going on in her head there? Like, why are you going through with this lady if you can't even stand the dude?
When he smashed the cake in her face and hair, then went off drinking with his buddies. In 12 weeks, she filed. Good thing I didn't buy an expensive gift. Groom got into a fist fight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context: groom and bride's dad. Actually, most people in these families, if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though.
That's one long fight. I'm a wedding photographer and I have a few of these. When a very young, not dating long couple say things like the partner is perfect and we never fight. When there's name calling, I particularly cringed at. It's because we so get each other and are so comfortable that he can call me dumb slut as a nickname. They didn't last the year. One where the wedding was all about the groom promoting his band. He even sang his bride a song that was literally just him showing off his vocal range with some classic piece. She stood up and joined him on stage halfway through and he looked annoyed that he had to share the limelight. They lasted about 2 years. He was sleeping with the other vocalist in the band.
They got secretly married at the local town hall out of spite to the girl's father, who did not agree with the relationship. This happened right out of high school and they divorced during my sophomore year at college.
Spite. The foundation of all great marriages.
The most beautiful wedding I've been to ended in divorce. Venue was where the groom's father is buried and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce.
My friend got married to her boyfriend of 15 years. It was an urgent wedding because her mom was dying of terminal cancer. She was given a few months to live and died 2 weeks after the wedding. The wedding was beautiful, and also was a funeral. My friend found out later that her husband had been cheating on her. He is the one person I've known who I may struggle to ever forgive.
He complained she was mean to him throughout the dating life. The day before the wedding, all of the groomsmen and the groom's friends told him not to marry the girl. Like, straight up. They lasted less than a year.
An ex-friend of mine is in such a relationship, except manipulative and controlling. He is finally starting to see it after 10 years of friends and family calling it out, but he's not strong enough to leave her. He's tried 4 times now and always caves. My boyfriend's brother has an abusive 3-year marriage. If they're breathing, they screaming at each other, that the family has been warning him about since before the vows. His mother especially has been vocal about it. He's finally contemplating divorce after she started punching him in the middle of the night for no reason. My husband was the best man at a wedding. The bride was a nightmare. Not just during the wedding, but in general everyday life. All of the friends hated her, and she had no friends of her own. We knew it was doomed when, during the portraits, the bride was making everyone miserable as can be. The groom said, exact words, "I'll just send her to therapy. And, if that doesn't work, we can just get divorced." And #X200B. Edit, for emphasis.
Therapist here. I'm never optimistic about this situation. People going to therapy for other people's satisfaction is like court-ordered rehab. It's rarely successful if your heart's not in it.
My wife is an event planner with a particular talent for higher-end weddings. I'm talking about $150,000 and up for the reception, venue, catering, decor, music, alone. The best I've heard from her is the following. And #X200B. Greater than bride and her mother were discussing terms of the pre-nuptial agreement on the day of the wedding while doing hair and makeup. Something about a 1-year clause after which the terms eased and the bride could exit the marriage with a nice payout. So I guess the marriage lasted at least a year?
The bride told her bridesmaids that she didn't actually want to get married. Multiple times. No one told the groom until after the divorce.
Had a friend who did this. Kept telling me and other friends she wasn't sure she wanted to get married anymore and was having second thoughts. We all told her to call it off, but she went through with it anyway. They split 6 months later.
My best friend's wedding is tomorrow and I told her about how I've heard several wedding photographers, videographers say that shoving cake in the face is almost a for sure factor that they're going to divorce. She told me, oh yeah, I told him not to, but he probably will anyways, so we'll see how this goes. Edit. I will update. Another edit. Today is the day, but it's not for another 12 hours, so please be patient.
I've heard some version of that cake smashing story so many times I feel like there needs to be a PSA about it. Marriages survive affairs more often than they survive an unwanted cake smashing.
The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us the attendees and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over. Sigh.
Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it. His third wedding. Same venue and same after ceremony driving away vehicle as the first two.
That is definitely a bad sign.
The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entering into a betting pool of how long the marriage would last at the wedding reception. IIRC the best man won. Price is Right rules at 14 months.
Surely you confide in your friends or even your parents about the whole thing, but who am I to say?
They were together since junior high, and would break up and reconcile every 3 to 6 months. Everyone was just sick of it, friends and family, and the marriage, at age 19 in the summer between freshman-sophomore year at college, was obviously an attempt to force the relationship to stick. It did not, but at least no kids were involved. I should say the bride, groom did not participate, everyone else did. That would have been glorious.
Not at the wedding itself, but when my spouse and I went to pick up our marriage license, we encountered a young man shouting at his fiancée outside the building because she had failed to remind him to bring the right IDs. We were like, big yikes. I hope they're doing okay.
When the groom started off his speech by saying, "We all know I didn't want to get married, but we're here for ______ bride ____ child we had together _____. 1 year, 3 months later they were finished."
That is so sad.
The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him.
What did she say?
I wish I could remember the specifics, but it was all about how they were always together, all the late nights they spent together, etc. She was so tearful during it too. I'm not making it sound as bad as it was, but I assure you, it was bad. We noticed during the wedding the soon-to-be mother-in-law of the bride was insufferable. Every chance she would make it about her and her son the groom. God forbid she let her new daughter-in-law have the spotlight. The mother-in-law had the photographer follow her around for most of the wedding. Most pictures have her in it. She was always near or around her son, but like always touching him too. It was weird. We joked that all three of them are going on honeymoon together. She gave an hour-long toast about how she is still the most important person in her son's life. I think she said something like, "You may be his wife, but he'll always be mommy's little boy." She always went into way too much detail about how she breastfed and changed his diapers. She danced with her son more than the bride. And I'm talking not 60/40ths. Like 90% of the time it was mother and son dancing. At one point she was even bumping and grinding on him. So at no point did my girlfriend and I think the bride was going to put up with this crazy mill for more than a couple years. Sure enough, she got pregnant soon after the wedding. A couple months after the baby was born she filed for divorce.
Now that's a poo show if I ever heard of one.
I live for these threads. Anyway, I know a photographer who was offered to shoot a wedding on the Gold Coast, Australia. If you're from Australia then you know the Gold Coast, while beautiful, has a lot of Jersey Shore types living there. It's kind of like Miami but no celebrities and very very trashy. My friend is getting shots of everybody getting dressed up at the same time because the groom, groomsmen, bride and bridesmaids are all getting ready in the same room. The groom decided to have his bucks party, bachelor, stag do, the night before, so they're all hunger over his poo and snorting line after line of coke. Something that is making my photographer friend's job hard because she can't get any nice shots of the groom or groomsmen without these illicit DG in view. The energy in the room is getting uncomfortable, so the bride asks if they could take it easy on the coke and get a couple of nice photos. The groom yells, "Shut up, see," and keeps snorting. The girl who got my friend the gig said they divorced like 4 months later. Another friend of mine was pressured into marrying his girlfriend of like 8 years because she dropped an ultimatum. Proposed to me within a year or we're done. He does, so they get married, but of every wedding photo she posted on Facebook, neither one of them looked happy. They divorced barely a year into their marriage.
I wonder how many marriages prevail after "shut up, see."
This was my sister's best friend and it was a bachelorette party moment. Bride had been having an affair, everyone knew it. The groom's friends tried to tell him, but she convinced him they were making it up. I mean, at that point it was just sad. She actually had the balls to force fiancé to apologize to the guy she was sleeping with for the accusations. The night of the bachelorette party she actually took all her bridesmaids back to the other guy's house and spent the night with him. He came to their wedding. It was so awkward. Everyone knew and everyone was talking. The groom was told, but chose to overlook it. After the wedding she insisted the other guy come on vacations with her and her husband and included him in all their social functions. Now, if they're non-monogamous, whatever, go crazy. But her husband was an absolute wreck about it for years and she just kept gaslighting him. No one could convince him to leave her. She told my sister that a fair guy insisted he would never marry her and didn't want kids, so she was using fiancé to get them. They ended up divorcing 2 years later after their second child was born. She immediately moved in with a fair guy and they did end up getting married.
How unbelievably cruel.
Showed up to the wedding of a friend of my husband's who I knew casually. When we arrived at the church, the groom was very drunk in the parking lot, and getting drunker by the minute. I thought it was kinda nuts since it was a full Catholic ceremony which involved lots of kneeling and standing. I honestly have no idea how he made it thought that, but he did. At the reception, he proceeded to continue the drinking party, while his new wife cried in the washroom. When it was time for the first dance he kind of stumbled around the dance floor despite a year of dance lessons. When it was time for him to take his new wife's garter off and throw it to the bachelors, he instead did a striptease type dance and got himself down to his underwear, in front of many elderly family members. People were shocked and talking, and all in all it was a poo show. I gave this marriage a year or 2 tops. They, however, are still married 25 plus years later.
Greater than when it was time for him to take his new wife's garter off and throw it to the bachelors. He instead did a striptease type dance and got himself down to his underwear. I mean, even getting blind drunk. The result here is so far away from the objective, I just wonder what was going through his head. Lol. I was at the wedding of one of my mum's oldest friends and she clearly had more fun dancing with the best man after the wedding. Long story short, they dated for a while after the divorce.
Your potential replacement is always closer than you think.
The part of the vows where you pledge monogamy. The audience laughed.
I'm sorry, they what?
I was kindly included in a last-minute +1 to the wedding of a family friend who I'd never met before. At the rehearsal dinner, or the German equivalent, the Polterabend, the guests smashed ceramic and porcelain items on the ground. I was fresh in Germany, so this was all pretty out of context and frightening, but my boyfriend explained that it's a tradition, reminding the couple that life is sometimes difficult and you have to work together to clean it up. The bride kind of half-heartedly motioned to the groom to sweep it up. He did a little bit, then just moved on to talk to his friends, leaving most of the shards strewn around the yard. Additionally, I don't think I saw the couple talk to each other once over the next 3 days of celebrations. It was a gorgeous wedding, and I'm so grateful that I was invited. Really good way to begin living in a new country, but it wasn't surprising to hear that they divorced a few years later.
Oof, how symbolic.
When he raised his eyebrows and gave her a knowing look during the "for richer or for poorer" portion of their vows. For context, he was a newly drafted pro athlete and she was a big fan of his signing bonus.
Worked as a limo driver. Ostensibly, I was doing a practice run. Bride's family and groom then said, "Surprise. We are doing the wedding today." Bride was stunned and silent the whole time. It was the one time when I was going to break the prime directive. And #X200B. Edit. Grammar. Edit 2. Thanks for the award, kind stranger.
I do not even understand how this works logistically. Were only some guests notified of the real date? Did a bunch of vendors and guests show up during the original wedding date and wonder what was going on? So many questions. I do not understand humankind sometimes.
It wasn't a big wedding at all. But as far as I could tell, she was the only one not in on it.
A month before the wedding, the couple made an appointment with me, the church music director, organist, to plan music for the ceremony. Each made suggestions on music he or she would like. But no matter how many pieces were considered and demonstrated, they couldn't agree on anything, and would get into heated arguments over processionals, recessionals, vocal solos, and prelude music, even though they were all good possibilities. The bride and groom simply seemed indifferent to one another's wishes and needs. In the end, based on what I heard each of them most wanting, I offered compromises in an effort to bring about peace, selections which they finally agreed to. They were engaged, but showed no signs of being in love.
I just played at a wedding where it was the opposite. Bride and groom had no idea you usually had music at a wedding. I suggested canon because the groom's family wanted super slow worship music and the bride was too afraid to speak up. Then last minute her aunt, the bassist's mum, says to play Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen, and even though it was instrumental some of the groom's family straight up leaves. Also once they found out there was going to be music the groom's family wanted to be the ones playing and singing but those kids were super raw, amateurs and expectedly backed out once they saw the crowd. Leading to the groom's family trying to pretend they didn't know there would be a band and trying to get my girlfriend, vocalist, and my bassist off the stage. The cherry on top is the pastor marrying and went off on a tangent and said because she was a single mother this relationship was doomed and she damned any future children they'd have and cursed their relationship because she had sex before marriage.
The groom took the stupid cake thing to an extreme. The bride had given him his bite, and mushed a little on his chin or nose. He then took a piece and mashed it into her face so hard that I was expecting her to end up with a bloody nose. Cake and frosting got up her nose, in her eyes, down the front of her dress, etc. The bride had to go get cleaned up, had her makeup redone, and was ugly crying within an hour of saying, I do. He didn't give a F.
Had a buddy, this was almost 30 years ago, by the way, whose girlfriend told him that if he mashed the cake in her face, it was over. She told him at least 10 times in my presence. Day of the wedding, his buddies had gotten to him by making the whip noise and saying he had to show her who wore the pants. She fed him his piece, he mashed her face, she walked out and had the marriage annulled.
At my wedding she paused for a long second before saying yes. The woman marrying us was like, oh she's thinking about it. She laughed it off and said yes. We lasted 3 almost 4 years married.
Or, sorry buddy.
When they disappeared for half an hour during the reception. They were both saving themselves for marriage, and were desperate to bone down. Which is a fine thing to want. But it turns out that was more or less the main reason they got married. They made it almost a year.
My high school teacher told me a story of 2 people who waited for marriage too. In Utah, they have a massive pee problem and the husband definitely watched too much. He brought an outfit, a movie, toys, and I swear a whip for their wedding night. The wife burst into tears and locked herself in the bathroom for the entire night. My teacher's lesson was to talk to your partner about everything including sex lol. Just before the wedding started my mother turned to me and said, you are making the biggest mistake of your life, if we get in the car and leave now I will never say another word. She was right.
My grandmother has told every woman in our family that she'd support them backing out of a wedding. Not necessarily because she thinks the relationship won't last. In fact typically she's just saying it as a, hey just so you know, you can change your mind. She told me that no one supported her when she started having doubts about her first marriage right before the wedding, and she never wants anyone else to feel trapped. But if me or any of my cousins were in a relationship where she felt strongly about it being a mistake, I could totally see her having the car at the curb.
Your grandmother is a smart woman. We should all know we can always change our mind and accept the opinions of others.
YTF am I reading this the morning of my wedding? Edit for anyone interested. It went great, other than me losing my ring during pictures. Thank you all for the well wishes, it means a lot to us both. Lots of love for everyone.
Get the F out of here and go get ready.
Wedding photographer here. I can think of a few. Full-blown row during dinner, had another couple fist fight during a first dance. An infamous one for me was leaving a venue late one night and as I'm walking to the train I can see the bride down an alley, on her knees with the best man. I was the wedding photographer for a reality TV show. End of the night, I'm having a few drinks with the film crew and the groom has come up to me and one of the producers and says, "I think I've made a big mistake." So we're trying to be reassuring and telling him it's natural to second guess such a big decision, to which he replies, "No, I mean I think him gay." I had 'em both on Facebook. The drama the next week was mesmerizing to watch unfold. I've got a ton of these stories. Edit, since you asked. Was working with a video guy who had the bride and groom on radio mics. Sat around waiting for the evening action to kick off and the video dude called me over and said, "Listen to this." Groom was talking to one of the bridesmaids about how they had to end their affair now he's married. Not a, how could you tell they wouldn't last, but shooting in an old church on the hottest day of the year. Watching the groom wait for the bride and he's swaying back and forth. Next thing he's fainted, fallen forward and slammed his mouth into a stone step. Smashed his front teeth out, blood everywhere. Had a bride and groom on a trampoline for photos, groom's heading downward, bride's about to go up, he lands on her dress just as she goes up and she pops out the top of the dress, boobs flailing around in the air. Shot a traveler wedding which erupted into a massive brawl. Watched a drunk usher knock over a wedding cake. Weddings are amazing. I've been doing this for about 12 years and seen some sights, but I still love shooting them even now.
Greater than an infamous one for me was leaving a venue late one night, and as I'm walking to the train I can see the bride down an alley, on her knees with the best man. I always hear stories like this and it just confuses the hell out of me. Like, cheating in general is bad enough, but on your own wedding night? Why even get married at that point? Edit. Please stop replying to this with your own stories of people cheating on their wedding day. It's making me sad.
Former wedding DJ here. I've seen some poo. Top 3. 3. Huge brawl on the dance floor between the entire bridal party. Bride knocked her new hubby the F out. 2. Groom was going after the garter, blindfolded. Picked the wrong girl, maid of honor. Should have known it wasn't his bride when the garter wasn't there. Had his head up her dress for way too long. 1. Bride disappears right after dinner for about an hour. After she returned, groom's father comes up and asks for the mic. Proceeds to announce to the entire place that his son's new bride was just upstairs stupping her ex-boyfriend, and that the marriage is over. Crazy times, man.
I'm sorry, blindfolded?
I worked at a nice restaurant in Nola. Bride is lovely, she is excited and very receptive to our suggestions on things in their budget. Groom is an insufferable know-it-all. H is bargain hunting. Crab cakes don't cost that much, what if I buy them and you serve them? On their big day, him holding the door as they walk out the first time as husband and wife. W, we got married, him so happy. H, not really, we gotta fill out paperwork and file it with the state. I've seen 3-week-old balloons less deflated than that poor woman. I hope she got out of there.
Greater than H, not really, we gotta fill out paperwork and file it with the state. Last wedding I went to was pretty clever on that front. They had the marriage license and everything ready to go. Officiant came up to their table at dinner and they signed them with a flourish in front of everyone, made it into a fun moment.
That's a lovely touch. My officiant just handled it after the ceremony and got it put in the mail for me. He just wanted to pop her bubble. The day only registered as an expense to him.
They were both so drunk they were slurring during the vow exchange.
One of the best pieces of advice we got from my wife's parents was to get married early in the day, and I'm so glad we did. Ceremony was at 11:30 a.m. on a Saturday, so we didn't have to worry about anyone in the wedding party showing up drunk. Then everyone still had like 12 solid hours to drink and party at the reception and beyond. I get why people sometimes like getting married later in the evenings, but daytime weddings will always be my favorite.
The ceremony was delayed, because the bride and groom were on the phone with the groom's mother, who refused to come to the wedding, trying to be talked into still going through with it. Apparently they had a huge and physical fight the night before. Their roommate at the time didn't come either. He told me what he saw in the house the night before was enough for him to know this wedding was doomed and they should not be dating, let alone getting married. And #X200B. Edit. In an attempt to answer some of these questions. First, this was about 20 years ago and we are all in our 40s now and have moved on with life since. So, I don't know why the mother wasn't there. I just remember thinking it was weird when I noticed she wasn't, and then later heard they were on the phone with her. The roommate was visibly angry when I went to pick him up for the wedding. Outright refused to come. and I think ended up moving out and basically disappearing after. He was a big dude who worked as a bouncer at clubs, and my impression was he had to go into work mode the night before in his living room and wasn't happy about it. I never heard details and I wouldn't have felt right asking for them. I am still friends, in the sense that I see them every few years, with both the bride and groom. See my comment below for how they turned out. Happy ending considering. I should also add, the years in which they dated and got married, all of us were very heavy binge drinkers. We were in our 20s and worked service industry jobs. It seemed normal almost for this much drama to be around. Looking back, I don't have the same opinions. No one involved ended up in rehab or prison and all live relatively normal lives now.
Did they still go through with the ceremony?
Yes. They stayed married for a couple years, had 2 kids, finally divorced and are now really good friends and great co-parents. But the years they were married were rough.
I was the maid of honor. They seemed like the perfect couple, together for nearly 10 years and had this big, expensive, beautiful wedding. Bride would have been happy with a small event but told me groom had a big family and had insisted. Alarm bells hit when I sat with her parents in the front row and realized the groom to bride ratio was so massively off. The groom had 3 best men, as well as ushers etc. His sister and one best man read something during the ceremony, and then all 3 said long speeches about him at dinner. It was all about him. The photographer was even his friend's mum, so she kept whisking away the boys for these hilarious lads shoots. The bride was ignored most of the day, and in the evening he got too drunk, spilt a drink over her wedding gown and danced with his friends. It felt more like a big birthday party than a joint event. I'd never seen that side to him, but I felt so sorry for my friend. It was like she was just there to be a prop to his plans and look good. 3 months after the wedding he began being emotionally abusive. A month after that he admitted he'd been having an affair for years, then left. If I hadn't seen the way he behaved at the wedding, I never would have guessed he had that in him. Edit. As so many people are being kind, I'll update you. My friend hasn't been able to trust or date again yet, and it's been 4 years. However, she has become an amazingly brave woman, who's traveled to some amazing places alone and is now retraining to change careers. I think she learned never to be a backseat passenger in a relationship again. Honestly, the way she handled the whole thing, with such grace and determination, makes me so proud to be her friend. She basically told him when he left that he would never see her, or hear from her, or about her again. She dropped all friends that had a connection with him, after he left, and made sure he would always live his life wondering if he made the right decision and what she was up to. I really hope his dying thought is about her. And I know for a fact hers won't be about him. She'll find real love.
Jesus.
My own wedding. We promised none of that immature smash cake in face BS. Well, she went for it. I was taken completely by surprise, dodged, and slapped the cake out of her hand in the manner of someone disarming an attacker. Awkward silence. Edit. For all those that are asking. Divorced in 1 year 10 months, well, that is when I left. Divorce took a year longer.
I love the mental image of just silence and you standing there thinking, RF, we're getting divorced, aren't we? As a sobbing flower girl stands nearby, covered in the cake you disarmed.
Actually, it splatted a Wyeth landscape, obviously a copy.
When my cousin and her husband said, I semi-promise, in their vows. As in, I semi-promise to love and honor, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea WTF it was supposed to mean, but I guess it sounds better than, I'll try, but if it's too hard, F it, I'm out. Weird twist. They've been married 30 plus years now.
Maybe it was an inside joke?
Maybe, but this was at a super conservative, Southern Baptist, fire and brimstone church. The kinds that still includes a bay, pretty often. I have never met a preacher at one of those places that would be okay with the semi-promise. It confused the hell out of everyone there. And there was a lot of side ayed, did you hear that too? Looks. In good Southern family tradition, no one really addressed it, just gossiped later. The world may never know.
When the maid of honor professed her love for my brother during her toast at my brother's wedding, and her husband walked up to the head table, picked her up and carried her away before she could embarrass him further. They lasted about 3 months after that. My brother and his wife on the other hand are still happily married 20 years later.
WTF, everyone knows you're supposed to burst through the church doors unannounced literally seconds before they are pronounced man and wife. Doing it at the reception is just tacky. Had an old boss who was divorced. He told me once, I should have known it wasn't going to last when the only happy moment I had on my wedding day was when I snuck out to smoke WD with my buddies in the parking lot.
Weddings are unduly stressful though. I'd focus more on whether you enjoy spending time with your spouse, just the two of you.
Prior to my wedding, I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated, due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarrassing me. We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made.
I was the best man at a wedding a few years back. At the rehearsal dinner, his future in-laws were treating him like crap. They were bossing him around, making him do crap, and talking down to him. They didn't let him hang out with his groomsmen afterwards while the bride went out and got drunk. They are now divorced. Edit to add a little detail. Yes, he should have stood up for himself. His ex's parents were making him do crap for the wedding the next day and he was too nice to say no. For you youngsters out there, this is cliché, but you really do marry the family and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, a lot of the times.
Knew a couple like this. The bride's dad was an actual gangster, pretty scary individual, and he treated the groom like poo. Kept commenting on the fact that the groom only had one kidney. Bride never backed him up either, just laughed. They are divorced.
High school friend of mine married a 26-year-old Marine who she had been dating for a year. Any situation where a 25-plus-year-old person is waiting on someone to turn 18 to get married is not going to end well, IMO.
The bride was caught being tag-teamed like 2 hours after the ceremony. The writing was already on the wall.
It wasn't at a wedding, but it was the first time I really sat down to talk to the couple. They came to town about a year after the wedding, and my wife, cousin to the groom, and I met them for drinks at one of the cool parts of Cool City. One of the first topics of conversation was what we knew about the lifestyle scene, a word which in this case means swinger. Afterward, I pointed out to my wife that the bride seemed to have been rather openly and boldly flirting with her. My wife shrugged it off because I'm often pretty terrible at that kind of thing. We met one more time, this time for a funeral. After the ceremony, we were hanging out in a hotel room drinking. The bride again seemed to be pretty openly flirting with my wife, and this time was going out of her way to show off her talent for bedroom knots. Again, the groom is there in the room. I pointed out all of this again, and this time my wife tacitly agreed. The two would divorce soon after. The bride, it seems, only discovered, or accepted, that she was a lesbian after she'd gotten married.
At my aunt's wedding. Pastor. Repeat after me. For richer and for poorer. The bride. For richer and for richer. Yea, they didn't last long.
During the cake ceremony, the bride rather forcefully shoved a piece of cake into the groom's face. It seemed to be done with a little too much anger and not enough good humor. You could tell the groom was not happy. They were divorced a year later.
Friend's wedding back in 2016, somewhat nice affair for us given we were in our early 20s and all. I was a bridesmaid and really hadn't met the groom much prior. He was nice but quiet. Day before wedding, the bride, a longtime friend, asked me to help babysit one of the groomsmen because he was a nightmare. Asked me, other bridesmaid, DJ, the works, to help cut him off from alcohol before the ceremony, not to allow him to make a speech, keep him from hitting on girls, the works. He was an alcoholic douche with 6 kids and 2 DUIs but was the absolute best friend of the groom. Day of the wedding, best douche breaks into the bar, gets hammered, has to be dragged down the aisle, gets the hair and makeup stylist drunk while they pretty much have sex on the dance floor, and makes what I can only assume to be a speech during the father-daughter dance. The bride was pissed and stressed as well, trying to get things to not be a total poo show. Groom blocked us from keeping him in check, wanted us to just let it go while he did everything the bride asked he not do. It was like a weird purposeful or intentional self-sabotage thing. Douche also broke into the groom's private stash of homemade meat he'd made special just for the wedding, stripped his clothes, and ran through the parking lot hiding in bushes at 11 p.m. Same night the couple texted me asking if I'd want to be their third in their open relationship, which I find out later was mostly the groom's idea. I also found out later they got married pretty quickly because she suddenly needed medical benefits, all the while he had been asking for an open relationship for the complete duration of them being together, but she'd only acquiesce if he would marry her as well. Divorce finalized a year and a half later. Edit to add, no, I did not join them, don't poo where you eat. And no, stop asking if I'm X or Y person. Some of y'all have apparently lived through very similar situations apparently, but stop asking if you know me. I may have posted, but I have no intention of doxing myself or the people in this story.
When she went alone on her honeymoon, because she booked a trip to the Caribbean despite her newlywed husband having a severe sun allergy. Edit, because this kinda blew up and I saw some mean comments about her. She was a good friend and they had been together for some years. They married young and it didn't occur to them that it would be strange if she went on the honeymoon and he stayed behind. He was a good guy and just wanted to see her happy, and she really wanted to go on this vacation, because she had never left the country. They separated half a year after the wedding, and my friend, the bride, told me that the marriage had been a way to prolong the relationship despite both of them knowing that it was already over some time before they got married. Kinda like a couple gets a baby to save a marriage. It really was just sad because they were a nice couple, but they stayed friends after separating. And I can guarantee that she didn't cheated on him while away, they were both really loyal. About his sun allergy, he had red hair, a really fair skin and burned up within minutes. And I mean really bad sunburn, the kind you have to go to the hospital for. He always had to wear sunglasses, long-armed shirts and a hat, even on cloudy days, so the vacation was not for him.
My college roomie went on his honeymoon to Jamaica alone. The bride's family picked the resort and paid for everything. Only the bride refused to get on the plane at the literal gate, breaking down and crying and having panic attacks. Turns out this had happened every time before for sports trips and family vacations, but they thought for some reason, this time it will work. She is married now. And planned a honeymoon on an island. Rather than throw away $10,000 in vacation, 3 groom went alone. He said it was great. His wife wasn't mad, but her family was, for some reason. They lasted nearly 5 years and split 3 best of friends.
My wife's cousin said, I hate his effing family, they're complete trash, and also said something to my wife about sex being such an unsatisfying chore. Poor groom died in a motorcycle accident a few years later as they were planning their divorce, and she's been with a different dude every month since.
The couple got married 2 months out of high school after dating for only a year. The whole wedding was the moment.
I went to a wedding like that. Somehow they're still together more than a decade on. Don't know how happy they are given that I don't keep in close touch.
It was mine. Ex-wife had a taste for theatrics and wanted a choreographed dance number for the first dance. Wanted the whole wedding party involved, but there was no interest. I'd never danced, not even at a club, but was willing to take lessons with her with the understanding we would do something together so she could have her dream wedding. I sucked, but got through a few lessons of slow dancing. I can now awkwardly shuffle around, but don't expect anything crazy. The dance school wouldn't choreograph anything for us, so she promptly gave up. When it came to choosing the song, she decided she wanted I Want You To by Weezer, my favorite band, and the song had just come out recently, which has like a jamboree feel to it. It is not a slow song to slow dance to. I suggested we choose something else, but she insisted we would just slow dance to it. I made her promise she wouldn't change her mind. Sure enough, 30 seconds into the song she backs up and starts dancing a jig. I just stood there in disbelief, fuming while she kept shouting and motioning for me to dance in front of all our guests. To boot, we had set a budget, she exceeded it, then her parents decided to chip in $5,000, and rather than use it to offset what we were over budget, she decided to spend more. In retrospect, that should have been a huge clue that she didn't respect me at all. Cheated on me and ran off with some guy like a year later. Got remarried before we were legally divorced. Her parents never did hand over the $5,000, because they'd put a provision on it that we had to go up north for a weekend and take some stupid Christian financial planning course their friend ran. My ex was also an atheist and didn't want to do that, but knowing LU spent the money we didn't actually have. FFs. She had a panic attack while getting ready that he wouldn't show up, while implying he didn't actually want to be married again, but they were too far into it for him to back out. They were both barely 21, and it was his second marriage. Did I mention they got engaged 6 weeks after they met? And they only waited that long because his divorce wasn't final. She was relieved when he did show and only had a few shots to build up his courage to be there, i.e. he was poo-faced by 11 a.m. They separated a year later, but she somehow ended up pregnant around the same time. They got back together, for the baby, and then divorced when the baby was 2. Within a month of separating, she, and their kid, was living with a new guy that she had known for 3 weeks. ETA. Please don't share elsewhere, etc., etc.
Has she considered therapy instead? It would be cheaper in the long run. When the bride French kissed her maid of honor, instead of the groom, at the altar. It happened 40 years ago. The bride and maid of honor ended up sleeping together that night, leaving the groom alone. He never had clue. The marriage lasted a year. He finally understood and let her go. C'est la vie.
Oof. Hard realization that 40 years ago is now the 1980s. I used to work for an event center that hosted a lot of weddings pre-COVID. After one ceremony, I saw the groom slap the butt of one of the bridesmaids in the hallway. She laughed and with a big smile said, "Oh Jeremy, you'll never change." Edit. Thank you so much to the kind people who gave me my first Reddit awards.
I chime in with a, haven't you people ever heard of closing a goddamn door? So my uncle was getting married. I was about 9, I think. The wedding went smoothly up until reception. They had gone all out when it came to food and drink. The punch was good but really rich and mixed with the Arizona summer heat. My stomach wasn't happy and I ended up throwing up behind a rose bush. A server saw me and found my parents to help me. My uncle came over and was really nice to me about it and joked with me because I was really embarrassed. His wife came up and I could tell she was pissed off a 9-year-old got sick at her wedding. Rolling her eyes and glaring at me until my uncle asked her a question and she was suddenly all smiles. She apparently had a meltdown after they walked away. 2 kids later, it wasn't hard to believe when she cheated on him with her coworker when he was on a business trip overseas.
Not a wedding moment as much as a bachelor party moment, but my ex got married to a woman 2 years ago from a super conservative religious family. We were still friends for the most part and I was surprised he asked me to be a groomsman, but I figured, hey, always good to be able to stay friends with your exes, that feels like mature growth and closure. He got really drunk at the bachelor party and at one point asked me if I ever had any regrets about us breaking up. And I said I had loved him but no, we had made the right decision in the long run. And then he told me that he sometimes wishes that we were getting married the next week and how his fiancé's family will never accept him. And then after an awkward pause, he said, what if we just run away together? Laughed it off as a joke and said we should rejoin the group. Then he said it again later again in a joke tone. And then a third time later in the night. We had been friends for years but only dated for like 6 months. Turns out he asked the same thing to another one of his exes who wasn't a groomsman but was attending the wedding. The couple is still together technically but separated.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.